Hi, I'm John Collins. I want to let you know that I'm starting the National Paper Airplane Contest. That's right, finally a national competition every year. There's also a Kickstarter campaign to help out with the funding. That goes live Monday, February 2nd. I hope you'll check that out. It runs for about 30 days. So, to celebrate starting the National Paper Airplane Contest, finally, here are the full, complete instructions for the best distance paper airplane in the world, Suzanne. Everything you need. Here are the keys to the kingdom to come after my record. And by the way, if you use my plane and break my record, I'll give you $1,000. You don't have anything to lose there. So, check out the video, have some fun folding, have some fun flying. Afterwards, I hope you'll stop by the Kickstarter campaign for the National Paper Airplane Contest. And then, I'll see you in the winner's circle. We're going to start with some A4 paper. Now, A4 paper is a little bit different size than American letter size. American letter size is 8.5 by 11. And you can turn 8.5 by 11 paper into the exact correct ratio if you take about 19 millimeters off of the side. So that's just about that much. If you just chop off about 19 millimeters, about that much, all the way off of this side, you'll have the correct ratio. Now, the Guinness rules say that you can use A4 or American letter size to do this, but since the total square millimeters for American letter size are 60,264, and for A4 it's 62,000, you give up almost 3.5% on the area, which means you give up a lot of weight if you use A4, if you use American letter size instead of A4. So we're using A4 for the competition plane. You're going to want to use some really beefy paper. It's called 100 GSM, which is it's a fancy way to measure the thickness of the paper. It's a British system. If you use 24-pound American paper or up to 26 or 27-pound American letter size paper and just cut off a thin strip over here of 19 millimeters, you'll have pretty close to what you want here. Make a really good plane. If you use American letter size, unfortunately, the center of gravity is going to come up in the wrong place. The plane will not fly as well. So you are going to want to have this sort of longer looking ratio. You can see how much fatter American letter size is than A4. It just makes the plane fly differently. It'll work somewhat, but it's not going to work all that well. So here are a couple of things you might want to get handy if you're going to go for the world record one. An X-Acto knife that'll help you apply tape. You can use a folding bone either like that or like this. This one is my favorite one. You're going to need a pair of scissors if you're doing the world record plane. I like to use a chip bag clip to help hold the plane in shape, and you're going to need some 25 millimeter wide tape if you're going for a competition plane. But that's only if you're going for competition. Just regular old Scotch tape will work for the other plane. Okay, so that's everything you need to get started. That'll get you going with the correct paper ratio. And let's get going, show you how to make that plane. All right, so we're not making a horror movie here or shadow puppets. We're doing something I'm going to call candling the paper. Now, you can take a piece of paper that looks pretty good, like this, and then, you can't really see errors in some paper. Watch this. This paper looks pretty good, right? When you put it over the light, you can suddenly see that little scar. See that scar that's running diagonally across the paper? That's inside the layers. See that running across right there? Even the finest of papers sometimes has some kind of little interior scar like that. And my theory was I wanted this paper to be absolutely perfect to make a plane from. So if it had a scar in it like that, I discarded it. So you're looking for a perfect piece of paper all the way through. And then the other thing I do is I'll run it over the light and just heat it just slightly. And once you start heating it, you can see that the paper starts to curve a little bit one direction. And this one is curving like this just a little bit. I'll also check all the edges to make sure the edges are perfect. Make sure that there's nothing sticking up. You'll see shadows or little imperfections if there's a problem there. But this one is curving this way, and so I'm going to flip it over and put that side down. And I'll turn my regular lights on here. Now I'm going to fold with a white piece of paper because this is actually the paper that I used. I've got the spec sheet for you here on the website. It's Conqueror paper. It's 100 GSM. It's A4. And it's a really, really nice piece of paper. These things are consistent all the way through. So the first thing we're going to do, after we've candled it, stiffened the paper with the heat just a little bit, smooth it out, make sure it's all flat again, And now we're going to make a big diagonal here. Take the top and put it against the side. And since we're making a Guinness record plane here, we're not fooling around. We're going to make everything perfect. We're going to smooth that with our thumb. We're going to grab our folding bone, and we're really going to nail that crease. We're going to sweep that crease so it's perfectly flat and hitting that diagonal just perfect. Okay, now we're going to unfold it, and we're going to make a diagonal the other way. We're going to put this top right against this side here. And we are going for perfection here, so take your time. Line this up. Get this right. You're going to try to beat me. You're going to have to fold at least as good as I fold. And so, and by the way, I'm leaving the paper oriented this direction just to make it easier for you. This is certainly not the way I would choose to fold a plane. I'd be spinning this thing around, looking over it and lining it up very, very carefully. So now I've got my diagonal folds. And now we're going to open up the diagonal fold, and we're going to make some folds that use the diagonals for reference. I'm going to take this long edge and I'll lay it right against the diagonal. And as I do this, I want to show you something here. I'm going to give myself a little bit of breathing room here. And if I just shut, let's see, which light do I want to shut off? Let's try shutting this one off. You might be able to see it. So there's the crease, and I'm just going to leave it about 1.5 millimeters to 2 millimeters short of that crease. Why do I do that? That's to give myself room when I'm folding the layers later. I'm rolling the layers over later so that they don't bunch up. So can you see that? I'm just a little bit short there from hitting that crease. I'm taking the raw edge and I'm leaving 1.5 millimeters to 2 millimeters just short of that crease. Really important concept. It'll keep your plane lying much, much flatter, and that is the key. Again, if you want to beat me, you got to fold at least as good as I fold. Okay, so we got that crease going. Now we've got this other crease across here. For a world record plane, flat. You want it really flat, tight together at the end. So I'm just going to flatten that into that crease right there. I'm going to give you all the folding tips here. I'm not cheating on you. I'm going to give you everything that I know about making this plane. And we're going to take this raw edge and again, put it right next to that diagonal. Just give yourself just a little bit of breathing room. Keep those layers from bunching up. And you want to make that amount of space match the other space. You know, you want to really take care that you're making it perfectly symmetrical. And again, good hard sweep with the folding bone. Really get that guy flat. And again, we're going to flatten that little guy right there. Now, I could leave that folded since that's the way it's going to end up, but I've unfolded the other side. So you want to make sure everything is done exactly the same on both sides. So you want to make sure that the stress is exactly even on those creases. So even though I'm going to leave that folded eventually, I'm unfolding it first and then folding it back. It does make a difference. Now I'm folding that over. Okay, now I'm going to zoom in here just a little bit. And what we're going to do is fold the top down so that it goes right across this crease here. And as we do so, we are going to line up these creases here with the creases below. So you want to line this crease up with this crease down here that's just on the other side of this edge. And you can see that these layers here start to bubble a little bit. So as you're doing that, kind of sweep upward just a little bit. Just keep that boy laying flat right there. And then you want to line up those creases. And make your crease across the top. Again, bring the old folding bone in there. Give that a good hard crease. Don't be too panicked. If you got a little guy right there, that's fixable. Especially if it's like the same bubble on both sides. That's what you really want is just symmetry there. If it's bubbling the same on both sides, you're in good shape. Just nail your crease across there with the folding bone. Now, we're going to just follow that crease all the way down. You've got room here, so it should just crease nice and evenly for you if you match this crease up with this crease here. And you're just following it, doing that. Now, unfold it. We are going to crease this side, and we're going to unfold it. Now, you're going, why would I fold and unfold? Well, that's because when you fold it in half, we haven't made our center crease now on the plane. Now, when I fold these guys together, all the layers are going to bunch at exactly the same rate underneath there. Just going to zoom out just a little bit. It's all about controlling the imperfections in paper as you're creating a plane. Now, having put those edges together at the same time, we're going to fold it in half. We're going to nail the nose first. Lay it down here. Now, kind of pivot it around and take your time lining up the tail feathers here. You want these corners back here just perfect. So take your time, line those corners up so they're just perfect, and don't make the long crease on the plane until you're happy that those corners are perfect. And then start the crease going. And I'm starting back here. I'm doing this part first, and then I'm kind of working my way toward the nose, which should be in pretty good shape because you kind of made a pinch there to lock this guy in. You kind of held that together as you started folding the plane in half. So now the nose should be perfect. These corners back here should be perfect, and you're off and running. Now we're going to take our folding bone, and we're going to start to sharpen all the creases here. And we're going to sweep. You can see where all the layers are from here to here. We're going to sweep toward the nose and just stay inside of where all those layers are. Make a nice sharp crease there, really sharp. Flip it over, and again, you can kind of feel where the layers end. Start just downhill of that. Make a really nice sharp crease. Try not to tilt your folding bone one way or the other. That's going to affect the leading edge angle. You want this just to be straight on here. Really sharp crease right along there. And then you can sharpen the other part of the wing by sweeping this way. So make a nice sharp crease that way. Flip it over, make a nice sharp crease that way. And now we're going to sharpen even the center crease here. We're going to sharpen all of these parts of the center crease, even this one close to the layers here. Really super sharp creases. You even go in here to the nose, sharpen everything. I'm folding on a piece of plexiglass. You don't have to use plexiglass. You could use, a perfectly flat, polished table. You could use marble. You could use glass is good. Should be really smooth, though. You don't want to disturb the surface of the paper. You want to have something at least as smooth as the paper you're using, which is pretty darn smooth if you're using my recommended paper. Now we have 2 more folds to do, and those are the wing folds, and they start like this. We're going to start very, very close to the nose here, right about there, 3 to 5 millimeters up from the nose corner. So you're practically right on the nose. Now, as I'm folding over, something not obvious is happening here. I'm keeping these layers together with my thumb. I'm pushing up right here. And that keeps those layers bunched nicely together. And I'm going to roll this over so that this raw edge just kisses the corner of the tail. And that's how you make the wings precisely the same size every time. Okay, we'll flip this over. We're going to do the same thing with this side, only now to find where we started on the other side, just kind of lift it up. You can roll it over just a little bit and use your thumbnail to kind of start where the beginning of that crease starts so you can get those guys lined up correctly. You want this wing to match this wing, so I'm just making a little dent with my thumbnail right there, putting it back down on the table where you can fold. Always fold on the table. And now we're lining up those wings. And if your corners were perfect, when you folded it, this crease should come out perfect. And this tail right here, the tail into the plane, super critical that comes out as one flat piece when you're all done. Now we're going to nail these wing creases. And again, we're going to start where the bunch of the layers are, and we're going to work this way first, and then we're going to go do that way. That also helps you have that nice flared dihedral angle that's flat at the nose and sweeps up toward the wingtips. I found that this helps you just sort of naturally create that. So I'm just really nailing this wing crease here with the folding bone. I'm going to flip it over, and I'm going to do the other side, and keep that folding bone as flat as you possibly can. Now here's a move that really helped me in the long run. I'm squashing the nose right here. I'm just taking this nice rounded part of my folding bone, and I'm just pressing down real hard and squashing this nose really flat right here. You flip it over and do the same thing with the other side. Just using the round part of the folding bone, just kind of pivoting in there, squashing that nose nice and flat, making sure those creases are good. Now, I'm going to zoom back out here, and now we're going to sweep out the rest of the wing fold. Again, make sure your corners are set up and tight together, and then just do a gentle sweep out with your folding bone toward the tail. And flip it over and do the other side. You don't want to change the crease that you made much. You just want to sharpen it really good. And there. Now the folding part is done. And we're going to open it up. Just going to pull up about midway on the wing. Pull it up. And now you can see that the nose is kind of flat, and you're getting that nice sweep up on the wingtips like you want. Now, I've got a gauge here that we're actually going to use to gauge the dihedral angle. We'll do that as a finishing step, and I'll show you that in a moment. You're going to want to make one of these if you're going to make a lot of these planes. Now, I'm using my chip bag clip. I like this, and it's got some sort of a rubber jaw on it there, so it closes nice and easy on my plane. And I'm just going to close it right there on the where all the layers meet, and I'm just going to sit my plane right there for a moment. Now we're going to use our official 25 millimeter wide tape. And Guinness rules say that you can use a piece of 25 by 30 millimeter tape. So the first thing you want to do with your tape is, I'm just going to set the plane aside for just a moment. You want to square off the end of your tape. So I eyeball this. I do it. Make sure that your edge is nice and square. You don't want a jagged edge like the jaws on this tape dispenser would give you. You want a nice square edge, nice flat square edge. Now, you may want to make one of these guys. This is my 30 millimeter measuring piece. So it's exactly 30 millimeters from the end of it to right here. And I just put a little point on it just for the heck of it. But this is how I measure, and if we look at it here, it is exactly 30 millimeters. This is what I use to make all my planes with, the competition planes. So you can see that it's 30 millimeters or even 29. I shorted myself half of a millimeter there just so that I'd make sure I wasn't exceeding the limits for Guinness. So we'll take our little measuring chunk, put it out here, measure out 30 millimeters, and make a cut right there. This way I can go to the outside of the line with my scissors and I'm not fudging. That's where I'm supposed to be. I'm within rules. Okay, now I've made a chunk of tape, and what I like to do is I'll just take the tape and I'll just stick it to the back of the tape dispenser, and I'll just use the tape dispenser as a little tape holder there now to just hold my chunk of tape right where I want it. I can set my tape guide aside for just a moment here. And we'll widen out. And now we're going to start taping this plane together. Now the sequence of taping is important. It does help keep the plane in exactly the shape you want to tape in exactly this order. Now, we're going to cut a number of pieces that are going to be about 2 millimeters wide. And that is tough for you to measure. You're going to have to get used to cutting this if you're going to play this game. But there's, you can see how small 2 millimeters is going to be. It's a pretty small chunk of tape. 2 millimeters, if you try to measure and cut, that's going to be nearly impossible. So eyeball it the first couple of times. Just get in there and make a really small slice. So these scissors are about, the blade on them is about the width that I want. It's about a 2 millimeter width on the blade. So I just line it up, make a slice with the scissor, and then I've got that piece of tape stuck right on the blade there. And then I use my X-Acto knife and peel that off. And now I've got my little piece of tape. Set the tape dispenser aside for just a moment. I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. And now the first piece of tape is going to get applied. There's going to be 14 pieces in all. The first piece of tape goes right on this edge right here, where this edge meets the plane. So it's just going to go right there. Let me just zoom in so you can see what the heck I'm doing. There we go. It's going to go right on there. So I'm going to lay it on there about halfway down, kind of lay it flat right there. I'm going to bend it around, and it's just going to cover that seam right there, and it's going to hold this layer in place so it can't slip down when I'm throwing the plane hard. So that was super important. The plane can come apart when you throw it as hard as Joe Hayub can throw it, certainly, and even as hard as I could throw it. So now I'm just going to scoot my little bag clip forward. Excuse me, world record paper airplane clip. I'm just going to slide it forward, and we're going to do this joint next. So again, we're going to take our piece of tape, and we're going to saw off about 2 millimeters. That was kind of a sloppy cut. I don't have my glasses on good here. That was a really sloppy cut. But it'll get us by. You'll get an idea for what we're up against here. So again, I'm going to cover half of that seam just like that. And we're going to bend it around and cover the other part. So we're just wrapping it around the bottom of the plane. And now our next tape cut is going to be a bit wider. We're going to do 3 to 4 millimeters on this one. So it's not quite twice as big as what we've done before. And this is going to be what holds the nose and the main fuselage together. So there's my 4 millimeter, 3 to 4 millimeter cut. Set the tape dispenser aside just for a moment. And now we're going to take just the end of this guy. And this is going to be 4 or 5 millimeters that we're going to do this way. I'm just going to saw the end of this guy off. So there's a small piece of tape. And I'm going to move my clip one more time here to free up the nose. And now I'm going to put this little bit of tape right across the nose here. And that is going to keep my nose together, because in test flying this bad boy, you're going to have some impact. And so you need this nose to stay glued together here a little bit, taped together. So there's a little 5 millimeter piece of tape. Shut that guy right there, just like that. And move your clip back, getting ready for the next chunk that we're going to do. Now, the leftover tape there, we're just going to cut that directly in half the long way. And we're going to use that underneath the plane to lock together these layers here on the nose. So very close to the nose, maybe 8 to 10 millimeters off the nose, we're going to put that piece of tape right there and wrap it around. Hold it, squeeze it tight together, and wrap it around right there. And we're going to do the same thing with this last little chunk of tape. This was our wide piece that we cut. It's just a bit wider than the others. And we're going to go not quite halfway here. We're probably going to go about the 1/3 point. We want this front of the plane to be, much better held together than the back here. It's way more important this be really streamlined at the nose. So once again, squeeze it tight together, wrap that tape around there, and now that nose is going to stay together really good. The next thing we're going to do is start to tape the wings flat. And we're not going to do that in totality, but we are going to start. So once again, we go back to our small size, our 2 millimeter size chunk, and just get that going right down the edge of the scissors. And we're just going to take that 2 millimeter one, and we're going to cut that in half. And now I'm going to grab my little tape measuring tool, and I've put a middle point in that, like a 15 millimeter point. You don't have to pay much attention to that, but what we're going to do is use that 30 millimeter measurement. And I'm going to put this guy right on the 30 millimeter mark. I'm going to start right in here. Let me rotate this up so you can see what's going on. I'm going to start right here where these layers come together right there. I'm going to measure 30 millimeters that way with my little measuring device. And then I'm going to plunk the tape down, holding that wing flat. So let me just zoom in here a little bit so you can see what I'm doing. So I'm measuring from that corner, and I'm just getting ready to nail this guy right here. And I like to use my pointier one here for pressing tape down. I just feel like it does a better job pressing tape down. Now I'm going to flip this guy around and do the same thing to the other side. I'm just going to pull off my other little chunk of 2 millimeter wide tape. Using my gauge, line up where those layers meet down there. Measure out 30 millimeters. And holding those layers flat now is really important. It's all about keeping this wing flat. So you want to make sure that you're pressing those layers flat as you apply that piece of tape. It's all about that. And then once again, I'm going to use my pointy-ended folding bone to nail that. Now, the folding bone that I sort of shaped my own and had manufactured is going to have a flat round end and a pointy end. And like I said, that'll be available on the website pretty soon. So don't feel like you got to go out and buy 2 folding bones right away. Hang on and wait. If you're going to get a folding bone. Okay, so now, after we've made the first crease on the wings, now we're going to start nailing the tail together here. And so what we want to do is, again, go back to our original idea of really thin tape slices. This is going to be another one of those 2 millimeter tape slices. And this is a tape application that is going to drive you insane. This is a very difficult move to do. And I'm just getting the X-Acto blade going like that. I've got the tape right on the end of the X-Acto blade. If I hold it over the tape dispenser, you can kind of see. And now I'm going to take this piece of tape and I'm going to put half of it, if I can get tight on it enough for you to see this. I'm going to put half of it just on the top edge here. This is going to be really tough to show you. Maybe if I rest this up here like this. There we go. So I'm going to put half of it along the edge there. Kind of hang on to it and then roll this over. And then I'm going to bend that other half of the tape around the tail of the plane. This is a tough move. You're going to do this a few times. You're going to be yelling at me and yelling at the video. But that is a 2mm piece of tape, putting 1mm on either side of the tail so that that is locked together. Okay, and that's really all the tape that's required to lock that together. That's kind of a breakthrough for me in locking the tail together. You can look at the super slow-mo and see why that's necessary to have locked together. Aerodynamically, it makes a big difference to hold those layers together with a little chunk of tape. Makes a huge difference on the launch. That was one of our sort of discoveries with this design, is you could really get much further flights. And now we're going to go ahead and do the bottom half of the tail here. Same idea. We're just going to do half on this side. Stick down 1mm here, flip it over, and bend the other millimeter over to the other side. And I know that looks terribly difficult, and you're working with tiny, tiny pieces of tape, but guess what? You're trying to set a world record, so, you know, you got to sweat the details. Sorry about that. All right, so we got a couple strips of tape left in our little tape dispenser here. So we're going to make good use of these guys. We're going to go with a 2mm chunk here. And then we're going to shave off 7 to 8mm of that, you know, just a little chunk of that. And we're going to, again, working on keeping the tail stabilized. We're going to take this little chunk of tape and we're going to put it right across the tail here. And here's where you're going to find out exactly how accurate your wing crease is. You're going to just put it right there to hold your tail together. Take your folding bone and smooth it across there. Now, if you did it perfect, it should all look like one layer, like that. It should just come together perfectly and be flat. If you're a little bit off, a fraction of a millimeter off right there, your plane is going to rock violently left or right. And so it really pays to make that wing crease. I've thrown away planes after just the folding when this just didn't come out perfect. You have to fold a perfect plane. I can't stress that enough. Your plane has to be perfect. Otherwise, it's not a world record plane. Okay, now we got the tail nailed down. We're going to flip this over, and now we're going to complete holding the wings together, holding those layers down. We're going to take the rest of that tape that we cut, the 2mm strip. We're going to cut that in half, and we're going to do the outboard parts of the wings. And we're going to tape down this corner right here. Just let the tape lay right there on that layer, just all the way to that point. There's just a little bit. You can see because of the room that you left on that initial layer, the little space that you left between the layer and the crease, that's this little corner right here. You just fold to that first little corner right there, or rather tape to that. That's the end of where you should be taping. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. Just grab this last little chunk of that 2mm piece. I'm going to spin this around just to make it easy on me. And holding that flat, we apply our tape right there. One more piece of tape to hold the wings flat. Again, a 2mm chunk. That we are going to cut in half. And now we're going to go very close to the inside of the plane. We're going to go in here. I'm going to do something I don't usually do here just so you can see it. I'm going to take this clip off of here already. Normally you would leave that on. So I'm going to go very close to the inside of the plane and just where this layer here ends. I'm just going to overlap that chunk where the layer ends just a little bit. Hold the whole thing flat and go like that. And take my folding bone and press all those guys nice and flat with my folding bone. Okay? I'm going to do the same thing to the other wing. Right there where all those layers meet. Just going to cover that whole intersection and flatten that out. Now, what this is doing is turning this whole wing into one unitized piece here. So that helps you with structure, it helps you with aerodynamics, it keeps this whole wing nice and smooth, and so that's super important. Now the next thing we're going to do is flatten this tail here, and I like to lay it over the edge of the plexiglass like this, or you could use the edge of your table and then just fold really hard, but I can't zoom out far enough to get the whole edge of the plexi in there for you to see what I'm doing here, I don't think. Let me try to widen out. Yeah, you can't really get the whole thing in there. I'm just going to lay it over this edge right here, and I'm going to flatten all of the tape out, all of the tape along the tail here. That's super important. And then I'm going to press down all the tape here. So that's the only thing that I really can't show you on this camera angle, but it's really super important to go over it, flatten it out. Again, I prefer the flat nose folding bone to do that. So flatten this all out, flatten everywhere you've got a chunk of tape. Okay, now we look at dihedral angle. So let's get all this junk out of the way. And we're pretty close on dihedral angle here. So what you want is really flat right here, and then it's going to angle up as it gets out toward the wingtips. And you can kind of see that happening there. That's pretty close to what you want. That's about a 10-degree sweep right there. But in order to do that, what you really need to nail that down is a piece of cardboard. So here's what I'm using in order to do that. Now, I've got one angle here measured out at 155 degrees. I got another angle on this piece of cardboard measured out to 165 degrees. And it's literally just a piece of regular cardstock, and I used a protractor to measure that out and cut that. Nothing fancy there, right? Pretty funky looking. But I tell you what, if you take your plane, and at the back of the plane, you do 165, and we're pretty close here. So 165 there. And then the wingtips, you want to be 155. So 155 there. And then the nose of the plane, again, you want to be very flat. You want to be 165 here at the nose again. So this is how you do it. This is how you get that glide. The air is going to boil off the wings at different points during the flight, depending on how fast the plane is going. And you want the air to release close to the nose at low dihedral, and you want it to release at the wingtips at higher dihedral. So you want more tilt up as the air adheres further back on the wing. So this is how you do that. Variable dihedral angle. Now, the last thing we want to do after we set the dihedral is tape the top of the plane together. So we've got one more piece of tape here left over, and if it's big enough, and in this case it looks like it just might be, we cut that piece of tape in half, and we're going to put two chunks on there. Now, why two chunks instead of one? Well, I have found that I have better luck with the plane holding together with two attachment points. So I'll take one strip, and I'll put it, I'm just going to zoom in here just a little bit. I'll put it across here close to the nose, just so my piece of tape almost reaches entirely across that point. You see that? It's tough to see, white cellophane on white, but you can kind of make it out right there. It's right there close to the nose. And it's just far enough back so that the tape reaches right across. And then I'll take my last little chunk of tape, and I put it about 10 millimeters behind that. And there you go. There is your completed plane. That is a world record plane. Now, things to notice. In order to get that nice swoop at the end of the flight, this chunk right here of the trailing edge has a very slight bend in it so that the tail is just bending up a little bit. That is going to be used to control your up elevator. You can see that real easy sweep there. You want it just like that. And you can kind of work with the paper to get that in there. You know, you can kind of flex the paper up a little bit like that, or flex it down if it's bent too much. And again, the critical thing, this sweep in the wing for dihedral angle, it's flat and an easy up sweep toward those wingtips. And then it backs off again as it goes toward the tail. You don't need all that drag created after it gets past the wingtips. So there you go. There's your world record plane. Suzanne is the name of that plane. And get all the tape laying flat. Use your bone folder, flatten that tape, and there is your plane. Just like that, you are a world record holder.